Look, so there's really no better way to say this. I love cars, but like a lot of today's enthusiasts, I didn't really start out that way. Nobody in my family really knew about cars. I mean, I got uncles who have varying levels of automotive knowledge, but for the most part, I didn't really grow up around people who actually were into cars the way that me and my friends are. I mean, let's point out the obvious here. My favorite brand is fucking Hyundai. I don't really know shit, but luckily for me, by the time I had my awakening to my appreciation for cars, I had friends who were already well into their automotive journeys and finding their passions for cars and stuff. So while I was still going into it kind of blind, I basically had level 50 who were taking me through the tutorial. And I ain't gonna lie, I'm gonna keep it a bean. Knowing me, I probably changed the title of this video like 7 different times. So I really don't know why you clicked on this, but hear me out, let me cook. Stick around for another 3 minutes and 8 seconds and let me see if I can convince you to stay to the end of the video. All right, deal. So like any good video essay, we gotta start at the beginning. The Ford Model T was invented. Nah, let's fuck with you. The first car meet I ever went to was actually held at this bus station depot. I don't remember everything that was there, and to be quite honest, that was probably because the cars weren't particularly good builds. I hate to say it like that, but it's the god honest truth. But I mean, I can't hate from outside the club. I didn't have a car then, but I digress. Despite there being a lack of interesting cars, there was still this presence of an all-around good vibe. Everyone there was just trying to hang out for like an hour or two, talk shop with a bunch of like-minded strangers who share common interests. All of that to say, this specific meet basically set the tone as far as my standards went for how I think a car meet should go. And to be fair, it pretty much was like that for a while until it wasn't. So basically, quick rundown, I graduated class of 2020. Shut the fuck up. And I want to say that meet was somewhere around the beginning of my senior year, end of my junior year. That being said, about a year later, a certain type of gathering started to happen. Those gatherings involve cars that I'm not particularly fond of. If you're new to this car shit and you don't know what I'm talking about, takeover. Fuck these things, yo. Takeovers, if you live under a rock, are essentially a large group of people who gather in a crowd around an intersection and shut down the nearby streets to allow for burnouts, races, donuts, and just general hooning. Now in concept, this shit sounds like a good fucking time. I ain't gonna cap to you. And back when they first started coming around, you know, when the roads were basically empty, because you know what, you could argue that this is actually a pretty cool thing. However, the TikTok community took it even further beyond lockdown and just made it a regular thing to do, like post-pandemic. And I'm saying post-pandemic for the sake of simplicity. I know that shit never went away, but get off my dick. But the reason I have such a strong disdain towards the people that participate in takeovers is because now we have this entirely new subset of, and I hate to say it, car culture that is essentially taken my ideal of what car culture is supposed to be and just took a hot dookie on it. You know what I'm saying? More importantly though, as a car guy who knows there's a time and place for being hoons, literally just go to any closed course or an empty abandoned parking lot. Takeovers make it harder for us who don't do stupid illegal shit to just exist as car enthusiasts on like regular roads when we're just minding our business. We, and when I say we, I mean like car enthusiasts, never truly got along with local and state governments to begin with, but it would be ignorant to say that, you know, laws back then were not way more lenient than they are now. And I mean, even beyond the laws, people have literally died at these things, and these were people who weren't even participating or like weren't even in the area for the takeover. They were just innocent passerbys. I know a lot of people have probably seen that story, but the amount of times I've seen people online just either get smacked by a car, break legs, break other body parts, like get seriously fucking injured. I think somebody's been paralyzed before. I don't know if that was a true story or not, but at some point we gotta realize, yo, you gotta chill out, bro. But not my place to dictate what people do to have fun with their cars, their times, their money. If they get fined, they lose their car. Hey, you chose to do that shit. I can only tell you to stop. That's it. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I'm doing. I completely forgot to transition. The Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, you know them, I hate them, infamously known around the car community for essentially doing whatever they can to destroy the idea of fun. That's not what they do. Nah, but in all seriousness, in recent years, it seems like the EPA has only grown more resentment towards the car community and car modifications as a concept. Some car enthusiasts watching this video may remember back in 2016 when SEMA dropped the news that the EPA was essentially trying to prohibit the conversion of road purpose vehicles into race cars. Not only that, but this rule will make it illegal to sell aftermarket products to modify your car. All of that behind the mask of, oh, but think about the turtles and the whales and the ducklings. Bitch, suck my... Now, to be fair, that rule on paper would only apply to non-road purpose vehicles, stuff that was built for competition or races, but you don't have to be a lawyer to realize that it would only take the twisting of about 2 to 3 words for them to pass that legislation down to the smaller man, people like you and me, who just like to throw an exhaust or an intake on our cars, have some spirited fun, but safe fun. In Mexico. And I think the worst part about all this in general though is that even though the EPA was denied that ruling back in 2016, they haven't let up one bit on trying to reduce the presence of modded cars on the road. Even as recent as 2023, they put up lawsuits against Gearboxy, Advanced Flow Engineering, Keystone Automotive Operations. All of these guys specialize in aftermarket performance parts for cars, SUVs, trucks, and even RVs. How the fuck would you want to mod an RV? But okay, let's say you're like most of us and really don't give a damn what the EPA has to say. There's still the one elephant in the room that we haven't addressed yet, and that's cops. If you're a car enthusiast, actually this isn't mutually exclusive to car enthusiasts. If you're above the age of 18, chances are you've had a run-in with the cops, had a ticket, been pulled over. At the very least, you had some interaction with the police. But I can only speak for me and my group of friends when I say cops are dickheads when it comes to traffic violations. And that only increases when you start to do things to your car that miserable niggas whose wives don't love. Oops. That wasn't in the script. Cops particularly don't like. I haven't even mentioned my car because I'm trying to say that for either another video or something later in this video. But after I got used to driving my car, because it's the first time I was able to daily drive a manual, I started pushing it harder and harder, you know what I'm saying? I got a little comfortable. Let me see what the motherfucking can do, you know? But of course, the more and more that I started pushing it more often, my internal radar kind of failed me and I got my first speeding ticket. It was nothing crazy, 65 and 45. You know, I take full responsibility for that. Rules are rules. There's a posted speed limit. Hey, whatever. First time, I didn't think I was gonna let it happen again, you know what I'm saying? I didn't think I would get caught. But literally the very next day, the route that I usually take to work was blocked by an accident that had just happened. And when I say just happened, I mean I was 2 or 3 cars behind the actual wreck. There was no authorities on site. The vehicles hadn't moved. People were still getting out of the cars. And seeing how I was already late to work, like an intelligent person, I naturally turned my ass around and made my way to an alternate route. Unlike an intelligent person though, I spiritedly made my way to said alternate route in order to make up for lost time. And lo and behold, cop clocked me 67 in a 45. Exact same road as the day before, maybe like 1.25 miles apart. Now my only gripe with this one is the fact that he said he clocked me at 500 feet. Now I'm completely unfamiliar with how modern day police technology works, but
if his car was facing this way and I'm going that way, and then I also slowed down because I saw him at the top of the hill where I was, I slowed down before I passed him. How in the blue hell did he clock me going 67? I was only doing 67 back there.
Now, like I said, I'm no expert on police technology. I don't know how they shit works. I don't know if they got radars on the vehicles, like on top of the vehicles pointing backwards or some shit so they can like radar people from behind them. But the nigga's window was rolled all the way up, and I highly doubt that you can point a fucking scanner or radar backwards through a window and actually have that instrument work. Again, no expert, but that shit don't make no sense. My saltiness aside, when I got that second ticket, the cop literally asked me to roll my window up and proceeded to test my tint opacity. And of course he told me that shit was illegal, but I was kind of flabbergasted because if you look at my tint, I'm gonna put a picture somewhere. If you look at my tent, that shit barely fucking illegal, bro. Like that's, what is that nigga talking about, bro? But I bring that up because it leads me to thinking about people who constantly get pulled over for even darker tint or exhaust. I know in California, especially, being ticketed for having engine modifications is a pretty common occurrence, which makes me even more confused because there's so many car channels based in Cali, and even outside of that, there's some pretty huge car events all over the fucking state. But you know, I don't know, maybe the cops there just have some sort of mutual understanding with the citizens. I don't know. Yeah. Speaking of car channels and car events, another shift I've noticed in the car community is the way horsepower and car builds have become so diluted. We dead ass lost the plot when it comes to being a car enthusiast. Now you see, back in my day, I'm not gonna do that shit. Back in my day, anything north of 350 wheel horsepower was enough to not only have a shit ton of fun with, but also garner a lot of respect from other enthusiasts. Because once you've actually experienced 350 horsepower in something that was not meant to have 350 horsepower, you truly gain a new level of respect and understanding for anything with more than that. However, nowadays, you have kids on TikTok who haven't even sniffed the seat of a car that has 500 horsepower, and yet they're scoffing at 6, 7, 800 horsepower built cars. And now mind you, I've been fortunate enough, and this isn't me bragging, but I've been fortunate enough to not only, see high horsepower cars, sit in high horsepower cars, but I've also driven high horsepower cars. So I think my input is pretty valid when I say there is a major fucking difference between a Veloster Turbo, a V6 Mustang, a Z06, and a 911 Turbo S. The newer generation of car enthusiasts assume that you're slow if you're rocking anything less than 1200, which is fucking ridiculous. And to all my educated car guys and engineers, I think we're in agreement when we say 800 horsepower on a 2,000 pound chassis is just as fast as a 1,000 horsepower land yacht that weighs almost 4,000 pounds. I can't say for certain what caused this dichotomy, but I can generally attribute it to social media and the general saturation of not just big horsepower numbers, but cars in general. When you think about it, before social media, how often do you think the average car enthusiast saw a 1,000 horsepower car? Exactly, my nigga. That shit was fucking mythical. Meanwhile, in 2024, I can literally open TikTok or Instagram and see someone's 1,100 horsepower built Supra that they spent 4 years saving up for and another 1 to 2 years building. Then like 300 plus losers in the comments talking about all that just to get got by a Civic. Then I look at their parents like, all that just to raise a failure. Let me chill. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I don't attribute to the same fucking issues. I'll tell you a joke, I won't ever tell a lie. But yes, I'm guilty of diminishing the hard work of people who just want to enjoy their cars. And if you're just like me, you probably do the same thing to this group of people that I'm thinking of. It's the Scat Packs and Hellcat owners, I ain't gonna lie. Everybody and their mother knows the jokes, the names. I'm not gonna list them all, that's just fucking redundant. Shat Packs, Snap Packs, Hell Shats, Hell Kitty, Boat, Land Yacht, 392% APR, 392 credit score, and my favorite, Sell It. The Dodge, and I'll just go ahead and throw the entire Mopar community in there, gets a lot of flack for simply existing. And while yes, I do find the jokes hilarious, I also feel for the guys who want to socialize with those outside of the Mopar or even American muscle spectrum in general. One, not me, but one could argue that the car community wouldn't be the same without Scat Packs and Hellcats, seeing as how no matter what group you're an enthusiast of, whether it be BMW, Mercedes guys, JDM fanboys, hell, even supercar owners get in on it, everybody always lines their car up against a Scat or a Hellcat. It's almost like a benchmark for speed in the car community, a badge of honor, if you will, to say, oh yeah, my car eats Snap Packs for breakfast, or bro, I'll put buses on the fucking Hellcat, bro, that shit ain't nothing. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because on one hand, you can say, why would they want to keep comparing their cars to something they constantly ridicule and mock for being slow? But on the other hand, one could also say, obviously I'm comparing because I don't actually think it's slow, they're just jokes. So I mean, it really depends on how you take it. If you're someone who can have a lighthearted jab session, that sounds so fucking dirty. If you're someone who can take a fucking joke, or who can just sit there and let people think what they want with your cars, and you don't really care about other people's opinions, then I don't really think it's that big of a deal. But for the ones who genuinely just want to hang out with other car guys and who just happen to like Hellcats or Scat, it's kind of a shitty situation, I'm not gonna lie. I think both sentiments are valid, because when you think about the amount of Chargers and Challengers you see on the road daily, with each model year and generation having 350 different trims and options, that's a real stat, by the way. It's kind of easy to see how they get a lot of shit, or I don't want to say it, but they get a lot of scat. I want to begin this specific section with a question. Why do you want a car? And don't be that one nigga that goes in the comments is like, well, I have a job 30 minutes away. No, not what I'm asking. Why do you want an enthusiast car? I mean, it's not like a regular commuter wouldn't get the job done, right? There's even manual options out there for common grocery getters. If you're anything like me, it's because these enthusiast cars we've come to know and love have a certain character to them. Now, I didn't grow up when these cars were first put into production, but the cars of the 90s and early 2000s were some of the most revolutionary, bespoke, and all-around beautiful vehicles ever made. Honestly, some of the most beautiful pieces of art and engineering ever made. And not only that, but they were relatively affordable for the average car guy or car girl. Nothing looked like the next thing. And when enthusiasts were able to get their hands on these cars, the limitations seemed boundless for what they could do with them. And there was even less aftermarket support back then than today. Flash forward to 2024, and I'm gonna keep it a bean. The average car enthusiast is cooked. No exaggeration whatsoever. We cannot afford shit. And even for the ones that are able to buy these new performance / sports cars, they're borderline impossible to find without dealer markups or extremely long wait times for allocations. I've watched countless videos on the car market, how the different businesses that were affected by COVID fundamentally shut down the production of new vehicles, and just a bunch of other information trying to figure out an answer to why I wasn't able to buy a goddamn motherfucking Hyundai for a reasonable price. The answer is the economy. It's always the economy. It will always be the economy. And it just sucks because we have such a good lineup of cars available to us at the moment. I'm talking Mark V Supra, GR86, BRZ, Civic Type R, GR Corolla, WRX, S650 Mustang, C8 Corvette, ND Miata, still going strong. BMW's killing it with their M cars. Even my favorite brand, Hyundai, pumping out some nice shit with this inline. And I don't care what you just pause the video to go type in the comments. I love Hyundai. Fuck you. Eat a dick. I'm dying on that hill along with every GDI engine in existence. Unfortunately for a majority of car enthusiasts, the reality is that shit has gotten more expensive, and if you're anything like me, your 9-to-5 job is not reflecting that rise in cost of living. So the prospect of getting one of the aforementioned cars is slim to none. So logically, the next best thing would be to search for something a little more affordable, you know what I'm saying? Something like a used car. Yeah, that market's fucked too. The used car market, I would argue, is probably even worse than the new cars. Reason being is just for the simple fact that when purchasing a new vehicle, although you may be getting marked up prices and generally butt fuck no lube, you still get some added protection and relief in the form of warranties. But when it comes to used cars, there's also the hassle of dealing with shady salesmen and the risk of jumping into a car you don't truly know the condition of, no matter how low the mileage is. But okay, let's say you don't want to deal with shady salesmen. What's the next best option? Private sellers. All right, on paper, this seems like the best thing, like outright. People post their cars they no longer want on whatever website. You, the person with a fat wad of moolah burning in your hole. The person with a fat wad of moolah burning a hole in your pocket comes across it. You reach out, letting them know you want to purchase the vehicle. You and the seller agree on a meetup location, and after inspecting the vehicle, you shake hands, exchange funds and paperwork, and you ride off into the sunset in your brand new, well, new to you vehicle. It would be fucking awesome if that's how it worked, right? Yeah, no. Unfortunately, pretty much the opposite of that example that I gave happens more often than not. I'm just gonna go with the #1 culprit of this Facebook marketplace. That website is littered with nothing but delusional people thinking their car is worth just as much as what the dealerships are listing, without even realizing that the dealerships are inclined to do so to make a profit for a nationwide chain of dealerships. And they're also putting a little bit more effort into at least making the cars presentable. Maybe they're not mechanically 100%, but they definitely look like it most of the time. Meanwhile, Cletus McFugger Jr. over here just got told that if he didn't sell his piece of shit catfish Camaro with torn seats, missing radio, and mystery crust on the headrest, his fiance was going to take all 4 kids in the house. I genuinely don't know why anyone goes based on dealership prices for their vehicle, because at the bare minimum, like I said, the dealership will at least detail the vehicles and replace some weird items like tires, brakes, wipers, batteries, etc. Motherfuckers on Marketplace will deadass post their cum-stained Civics for $5K and have the audacity to say as is. Oh, to shoot you in the knee and take $500 off the top. I'm sorry, I just really hate the fact that I can't seemingly afford a non-running project car, something that I can learn on and get running in a year to test my knowledge and gain new skills. But you know, we move. But there's also another aspect of money when it pertains to cars, and that of course is modifications. Up until recently, I hadn't had much experience when it comes to car modifications, but I had a general understanding of just how crazy expensive it can be to do anything on your car. The only mod that I've put on mine so far is a catback exhaust. That shit alone was over $500, and that really put into perspective just how slow I was gonna have to take this whole modification process, because $200 here, another $300 there, that shit adds up fast, especially when you factor in gas that you're spending every fucking week. And sometimes those prices are for individual components. I think YouTube specifically emphasized this idea that you have to dump tens of thousands into your car in order to have something cool or unique, or to even just have fun. The big guys like TJ, Adam, Stratman, Cletus, many more, all of them do/have done some incredible shit with cars. Nothing but respect for them. They're honestly some of my biggest inspirations. However, I think they're influential in what feels like an arms race within the car community. Like, how often do you see big YouTube channels doing VIP builds, low lowriders or anything else that isn't high horsepower street slash drift missile. It's actually baffling to me that these channels still pull views, because at least for me, I can't relate to any of this. Like, the average Adam LZ viewer doesn't even have one of their dream cars, much less a damn compound full of them. No, deadass, we need to talk about how many cars this man has. Holy fuck. Some of these guys are building cars in like real time, 3 to 6 months, which is ridiculous considering the amount of money they put into them. And the most egregious example is Throttle. Now, I actually personally enjoy their content to this day. They're buying a blank and immediately modifying it format is actually pretty cool to me, but I do not have the facilities to buy $5,000 to $10,000 worth of parts all at once, nor do I have the time to build that shit within 2 to 4 weeks. It's like automotive YouTube is so far out of reach in terms of relatability that they've lost sight of why their core audience started supporting them in the first place. There is one guy that I want to shout out that has managed to capture that backyard mechanic meets vlogger meets Chad bro kind of vibe while still managing to build some pretty fast ass cars in the process. And what I think makes him stand out is that the personalities this guy brings to his videos almost outshine the car builds themselves. And before I continue that rant, the guy I'm talking about is Wyatt Webster.
Yeah, you know what that is. And that's not what it looks like.
Oh my God, bro! What? Is that Wyatt driving up there?
He's starting to gain some serious traction on YouTube. Last time I checked, I think it was at like 160K on YouTube, and I think it's well deserved. He has very similar chaotic energy to someone like Whistling Diesel, just the slightly above average car guy budget. But as I was saying, the realistic toned down scale of Wyatt's videos are akin to what I feel most enthusiasts do with their friends on a weekly basis. You know, get together, maybe crack open a few beers and just shoot the shit while shoulders deep in an engine bay. Obviously, I don't think everyone should or even could do this format. Wyatt and his friends most definitely have this dynamic naturally, and I think that authenticity is what helps not only separate him from most other car guys in the space, but resonate with his audience as well. And from what we see in the videos, even with some sponsorship money, bro is just like us, and I think that's pretty fucking cool. And now the final piece that I think plagues the car community these days, simply just a shift in generations, bro. Just like how when the SoundCloud era of hip hop and rap took over and all the old heads were shitting on it every chance they could get, as much as I hate to say it, I think my generation is starting to become those old heads a lot earlier in life, unfortunately. I was lucky to be born in the early 2000s. Yeah, go type your fucking damn comments and count your days, bro. I got your IP address already waiting, bro. But I will say that I was lucky to be born when I was, because now I can say I came from an era where the world was rapidly progressing in technology and engineering, and not even just with cars, but in general, to the point where we had manufacturers who were known for regular commuter cars creating shit that could compete in races with actual purpose-bred supercars. The economy up until 2008 was actually in a great place, and it seemed like cars could only get better as time went on. But just like the dot-com bubble of the late 90s, another bubble emerged around the turn of the decade. And one aspect of the automotive space that I've sort of neglected to touch on is actually the answer to this whole question. If no one is buying enthusiast cars, what the fuck are they buying then? Sport utility vehicles, aka SUVs. They've basically become the industry standard for vehicle manufacturers. There are quite literally 2 automakers left that do not have an SUV in their production history or are not making one right now. Take a wild guess who those 2 are. McLaren and fucking Bugatti. As much as I wish I was making this up, there quite literally is no escape from the SUV, and there are rumors floating of McLaren eventually folding the peer pressure, so we just might be fucking cooked. And of course, if we're gonna talk about things taking over the automotive space, we have to mention how prevalent hybrids and EVs are becoming. Despite them existing for decades, as I mentioned before, the EPA is seriously cracking down on emissions reductions from gas-powered combustion engines. If you ask me, they should start with planes and fucking semi-trucks, but I don't know shit. Unless you're roommates with Patrick, you most likely know how ridiculous the EV takeover has become. And as much as I don't want this to be the case, my current and most plausible theory is that the 2008 financial crisis was the catalyst for most automakers to stop spending as much money on research and development for racing or like sports cars. And thus less resources went to the development of said cars, and in turn, the rise of the SUV began. And not only did this keep manufacturers afloat, it made them billions of dollars. bro. And you know the age-old saying, if it ain't broke, well, if it works better than the former, why go back? My main point being, the success of the SUV played a major factor in phasing out the enthusiast vehicle. And when you look at the formula for the modern SUV, it kind of makes sense. 3 rows, high ride height, latest available tech in whatever model or whatever year it is, practical, automatic, because 90% of Americans don't fucking know how to drive manual, comfortable and versatile enough to function as a multi-purpose vehicle. And you got to give credit where credit is due. For the average American family, an SUV is about the best you're gonna get, especially if you're someone who buys a car with the intention of driving it until it deteriorates. Now, yes, you could make the defense for wagons still being a viable option, seeing as how visually an SUV is just a wagon XL, but that's a topic for another time. We're in different times and the economy is in shambles once again, so the average citizen doesn't have the time or money to be dumping tens of thousands into a performance vehicle that's not only impractical but costs way more to maintain, costs even more to repair if something breaks. And to put it simply, having fun is just too expensive nowadays. That's the sad reality of the 2020 so far, and we're literally halfway through them. With this shift in automotive manufacturers' priorities, this eventually trickles down to the culture in the form of less variety at car meets. If the only automakers producing enthusiast vehicles are the ones who can afford to do so, i.e. the same 5 or 6 brands, you know, Toyota, Honda, Nissan, actually, Hyundai, what do you think you're gonna see in 2050 when we go to our car meets or whatever? It's gonna be the same 5 to 6 cars, probably the same modifications, whatever color wrap is trendy at the time, and you know how the shit goes. Obviously, I'm not blaming SUVs solely for this phenomenon. I'm just pointing out how all it takes is one little drop in the bucket to send everything tumbling over. And when you think about it, time kind of goes hand in hand with money, because with time comes inflation, and with inflation, along with the help of a global pandemic, the price of a new and used car increased. Meanwhile, the salaries of everyday people either did not move a lot or just remain the exact fucking same. Hell, for a lot of people who got laid off and just had to find something to make ends meet, your salary may have decreased. There's way too many variables to list, but the one consistent thing we can always count on is time. Although in retrospect, it hasn't taken much time for the car community to become what it is now. The amount of time that it would take to return to what it used to be is at the bare minimum double that. So what can we say definitively killed the car community, or at least in a lighter tone made it a former shell of itself? The answer is actually pretty simple. We fucking did. Our fellow enthusiasts. This is just me yapping, but I think car culture died when we started going to meets in search of stats instead of stories. When the cars become disconnected from the people who built them, then it's nothing different than a video game or a TV show or a movie. Not saying this is the case for every single car, but there is literal blood, sweat, and tears put into the vehicles you see on TikTok or even at your local meets. And the one thing that I hate nowadays, and this is the case at even some of the more esteemed meets where, you know, people are a lot more respectful and don't hoon as much, it's just the fact that nobody's really educating anybody anymore. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I didn't come from a car family. I didn't know much about cars when I first got into it, and so inevitably the younger people who are coming up after us are probably gonna be just as uneducated. Even with the access to the internet and all the research that they could possibly do, maybe they don't know where to fucking start. I mean, cars are fucking complicated, dog. These are literally engineered machines at the end of the day. And even beyond that, people simply just telling stories about, you know, how their car came to be what it is, or why it looks like that, or like why it's beat up or anything like that. That would just be nice to see at car meets. People just talking to each other again. I'm sure if we, myself included, stop being so quick to jump on the hate train, because that's a popular theme in 2024, I'm sure we could find interesting stories in even the most clapped out shit boxes in the parking lot. What would I say is the one thing that could bring back the prime era of car culture? Well, for one, stop fucking closing tracks and raceways, bro. Especially if you want people off the roads, just make tracks more accessible to the average enthusiast. But more importantly, we need to start having conversations again, and most of all, start educating each other, especially if you can do it without being a fucking dickhead. I know it's like a trend to be introverted and mysterious and kind of standoffish, but I'm willing to bet my next paycheck you're lying if you say you don't get even the slightest rush from someone complimenting your car, asking you something about it, or even taking a picture of it when you're not near it. It's the same reason why every time I go out and see another enthusiast on the road, I give a simple thumbs up. It's just a way to let them know that, you know, this thing that they worked so hard on isn't being unnoticed. Even if you aren't a car guy, girl, whatever, I think most of us can agree there aren't many things in this world better than being appreciated. If you stuck around to hear me yap, first of all, I just want to say thank you. But secondly, please drop a like on the video real quick. It takes like 2 seconds. If you really fuck with me, you know, you could leave a comment, you know, giving some thoughts and opinions. I genuinely would appreciate that, though. I honestly like comments more than I do subscribers or likes. I know for sure, I skimped out on some things. I might have missed some vital issues that plague the car community. You know, I didn't want this to be super in-depth or like research heavy. This isn't really supposed to be an educational video. 90% of this shit was like my own knowledge, my own thoughts, my own opinions. You know, I've had these thoughts about the car community for about a year now, a little over that. But of course, any sources that I did use, they will be in the description for those who care about that stuff. I hope that in some way, shape, or form, I influenced you to go and look at the car community with a different lens or a different outlook. And maybe you even change your approach to how you go to car meets or interact with people at car meets. I may not be the most educated or the most, you know, mechanically inclined, but I do love cars. This is literally the thing that I want to do for the rest of my life. It's the reason I have the job that I do right now. It's the reason I've had the past 3 jobs that I had. Cars mean way more to me than any other hobby that I've had in a while. This is the biggest thing I've been obsessed with since I got into art, and art was the reason I almost went to college, and I fucking hate college. But yeah, that's enough chatting for me. I love you. Peace.